At the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles on a Tuesday evening in March of 1967, 412 people filled a hall that smelled of chalk dust and old canvas. The overhead lights were the industrial kind, the type that flatten shadows and leave no mercy in the air. Every seat was taken. Men in sport coats sat beside men in gi tops. Tournament referees with clipboards stood along the back wall. The noise was the noise of a room that knew what it was about to see. On the main floor, a man named Gerald Reeves had just finished his third consecutive demonstration round. He was 26 years old. He stood 6 feet and 1 inch tall and weighed 211 pounds of documented verified fighting mass. He had won the AO Full Contact National Championship twice in succession. He had trained under 3 separate masters across 2 continents. He had not lost a sanctioned bout in 19 months. His technique was not performed for audiences, it was developed for outcomes. The people in that room had watched him work, and the room had gone quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when they recognize something real. He took the microphone from the tournament director. He had not been asked to take it. He took it anyway. In the next 43 seconds, something would happen on that floor that the 412 people in attendance would spend the rest of their lives describing to people who were not there. Not one person in that building understood what was already in motion. Not one of them recognized the man in the third row, sitting in the aisle seat, wearing a plain gray jacket over a white shirt. With a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand, they would understand later. By the time they understood, it would already be over. Gerald Reeves held the microphone at his side. He was not nervous. A man who has not lost in 19 months does not carry the posture of nervousness. He looked out at the room with the particular confidence of someone who has earned the right to believe what he believes. He spoke clearly, into a hall that was already quiet. He said that Bruce Lee was a movie actor. He said the techniques Bruce Lee demonstrated were designed for cameras, not for contact. He said that in a room full of real fighters against a real opponent. Bruce Lee's art would dissolve inside the first exchange. He said this not as provocation. He said it as assessment. He said it the way a structural engineer describes a building that will not stand. The room received this in silence. In the third row, the man in the gray jacket set down his paper cup. If you want to find out what happened in the next 43 seconds, make sure you are subscribed and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. Gerald Reeves had not arrived at the Olympic Auditorium by accident. His story began 12 years earlier in Detroit, Michigan, in a neighborhood gymnasium with a cracked concrete floor and 2 speed bags that were never both functional at the same time. He started training at 14 under a former welterweight boxing coach who recognized in him an unusual quality of physical intelligence. The coach said later, in an interview that appeared in a small regional magazine in 1971, that Reeves was the rarest kind of athlete. Not the kind who works hard. Every serious athlete works hard. Reeves was the kind who absorbed correction without ego. He felt the difference between what he was doing and what he was being told to do, and he closed the gap in the same session. That quality, the coach said, is not teachable. You find it or you do not. By the time Reeves was 19, he had cross-trained in judo, earning a brown belt, and had begun studying Korean Tang Sudo under a master who had trained directly with practitioners of the original military lineage. He competed across the Midwest circuit for 3 years, building a record that was unspectacular in its wins and instructive in its losses. He lost 4 times before his 22nd birthday. Each loss came from the same source. He was technically superior in every case. He lost because he was not yet patient. He would create a dominant position and then act before the position was complete. His master told him this after the 4th loss. He did not argue, he did not make excuses. He went back to the floor. 2 years later, he had not lost again. His judo coach in the winter of 1965, a man named Takashi Mori, who had placed in the 1960 Tokyo National Trials, said of Reeves that he had never personally trained an athlete with a cleaner hip transition under resistance. Mori said this to a room of his own students, not to flatter Reeves but to make a technical point. Reeves was in the room when he said it. He did not react. He wrote something in a small notebook he kept in the front pocket of his training bag. This is the kind of man who took the microphone at the Olympic Auditorium in March of 1967. Not a fool, not a braggart performing for a crowd. a man who had built his body of work across 12 years and 4 disciplines and 19 consecutive months without a loss, and who had arrived at a conclusion through evidence that he then stated publicly in a room full of witnesses. The conclusion was about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee had been in Los Angeles for 3 years by that point. He had come from Hong Kong by way of Seattle and Oakland. He had trained his whole life in Wing Chun under Ip Man and had then begun dismantling his own training to build something new. He called it Jeet Kune Do. The name translates roughly as the way of the intercepting fist. The philosophy was simpler than the name. It held that the most dangerous technique in a fight is the one that arrives before the opponent expects it. Not the strongest technique, not the most complex, the earliest. Bruce Lee believed that the fight is won or lost in the moment before contact, in the management of what he called the fighting measure, the precise interval of space between two bodies in which every technique either works or does not. He had demonstrated this philosophy in closed settings and private sessions since 1964. He had not yet made the films that would make his face known to everyone. In the spring of 1967, he was known inside a specific world. The world of tournament fighters, of dojo instructors, of men who read the small circulation martial arts periodicals that appeared in brown envelopes twice a month. In that world, his name was carried with a quality that was not exactly admiration and was not exactly skepticism. It was closer to the feeling of hearing about something you have not yet been able to test. Gerald Reeves had heard the name. He had read the assessments. He had formed a view based on what he considered to be an honest analysis. His view was that Bruce Lee's art was demonstrative, that it worked inside a controlled environment against opponents who cooperated with the demonstration by fighting in the style that the art was designed to counter. He believed that against a trained grappler, a real boxer, a man who did not move in the predicted pattern, the system would fail. He said as much into the microphone at the Olympic Auditorium. And then a man in the third row stood up. He did not stand quickly. He stood the way a man stands who has been sitting for some time and has decided that the sitting is finished. He set down the paper cup on the empty seat beside him. He removed the gray jacket and folded it. One fold, lengthwise, he laid it over the back of his chair. He wore a white short-sleeved shirt beneath. He was 5 feet and 7 inches tall. He weighed at that moment approximately 138 pounds. He was 26 years old. His shoes were ordinary leather shoes, not training footwear of any kind. The recognition moved through the room the way a signal moves through water. It started at the front where a man named David Chow, a martial arts choreographer who had worked with Lee directly, understood first and went entirely still. It moved back through the rows in a wave that was visible if you were watching from the side, which several people were. People lowered their programs. People stopped their conversations mid-sentence. The woman operating the score table at the far end of the floor put down her pencil. He had already lost. He simply did not know it yet. This moment requires explanation. Not of what was about to happen, but of why it was already decided. A fight is not two men striking each other. A fight is a conversation conducted in the language of distance. Every technique in every martial system is an answer to a specific question about space. How far away is the opponent? How fast can he close that space? What does he commit to when he moves? A fighter who understands these questions before his opponent does not win by being stronger or faster, though he may be both. He wins by having already answered the question the opponent is still formulating. Bruce Lee had spent 11 years refining a single idea. The idea was that the optimal distance for any encounter is the distance at which only one fighter can act and the other cannot yet respond. He called this the decision line. To stand on the right side of it was not an advantage. It was the conclusion of the fight before the fight began. Gerald Reeves understood distance. He understood it well. He would demonstrate this in the next 43 seconds with 3 techniques that were correct, executed at appropriate speed, aimed at appropriate targets. He would demonstrate it against a man who had spent 11 years studying the precise geometry that made those techniques arrive in the wrong place. Bruce Lee walked toward the center of the floor. The tournament director, a man named Harold Montgomery, who had run the Olympic Auditorium tournament circuit for 9 years, said afterward that he had placed his hands flat on the table in front of him when he recognized what was happening. He said he did not speak. He said it did not occur to him to speak. He said the room had a quality to it that he had experienced perhaps twice before in 9 years of running tournaments, which was the quality of everyone in the room understanding simultaneously that they were in the presence of something they would not see again. Gerald Reeves watched Bruce Lee walk toward him. Reeves had not expected this. He had expected silence, or dissent from the audience, or perhaps a request from an organizer to return the microphone. He had not expected a man in street shoes to step onto the floor and walk to the center of it without any visible adjustment of energy or attention. He said later, in a private conversation that was recorded by a journalist named Carl Ferris and never published during the principal's lifetimes, that what unsettled him was not what Bruce Lee looked like. What unsettled him was how he moved. He said it was the absence of preparation. He said most fighters, when they move toward confrontation, reveal it in the body before they move. A narrowing of focus, a change in the quality of the breath, a reorganization of weight. He said Bruce Lee's walk to the center of that floor was indistinguishable from the walk of a man crossing a parking lot. They stood 8 feet apart. Reeves initiated. This was correct. He was the challenger. He threw a lead jab, crisp, technically sound, extended to proper range for his arm length. Directed at the solar plexus, the target he had hit 200,000 times in training. His jab was one of the finest technical jabs in non-contact competition at that time. Harold Montgomery, who had refereed the bout in which Reeves won his second national title, said the jab was the thing he most trusted about Reeves's game. It arrived on time. It arrived at the right address. It did not arrive. Second one. The jab left Reeves's shoulder at full extension. At the moment it crossed the threshold that should have been Bruce Lee's torso, Bruce Lee was 4 inches to the outside of it, not retreating, not blocking, not deflecting, 4 inches to the outside with his weight forward. Reeves registered this as an error of calibration and adjusted. He threw a right cross immediately behind the jab, a textbook combination, the kind of sequence that works because the first technique occupies the opponent's attention and the second arrives into the vacancy. He threw it with 19 months of undefeated confidence behind it. Second 2. David Chow in the front row let out one short sound that was not a word. The cross did not land. It landed 4 inches to the outside of the space where Bruce Lee's face had been. Bruce Lee had not moved laterally. He had moved through the combination, angling off the jab's line by a degree so small that it was invisible from most positions in the room, arriving at a geometry from which Reeves's cross had no path. From that geometry, 1 technique was available to Bruce Lee and 0 were available to Reeves. Second 3. The woman at the score table picked up her pencil and then put it down again. Reeves felt what he later described as the lightest possible contact against the outside of his left knee, followed by a sensation of the floor tilting. It was not a sweep in the sense he understood sweeps. It was a removal. The support structure of his left leg was renegotiated without violence in the span of perhaps a quarter of a second, and the consequence of that renegotiation was that his entire body weight moved in a direction he had not authorized. Second 4. He was going down. Second 5. Harold Montgomery's hands remained flat on the table. He did not move them. He said later that it did not occur to him that moving them would be appropriate. Second 6. Gerald Reeves was on the floor of the Olympic Auditorium with his back against the canvas and the overhead lights in his eyes, and above him, at a distance of approximately 8 inches, was a foot that had stopped. The foot was Bruce Lee's. The technique was a heel strike, directed at the sternum. It had traveled from its point of origin to a position 1 inch from Gerald Reeves's chest in less time than it takes to register the decision to move. It was not there, and then it was there. The foot was held. Perfectly still. 1 inch from contact. Reeves looked at the foot. Then he looked up at the man it belonged to. The room held itself in a suspension that was absolute. Bruce Lee lowered the foot. He extended his right hand downward, palm open, directed at Reeves's shoulder. There are events that become stories, and then there are moments inside those events that become the permanent version of the story. The permanent version of what happened in the Olympic Auditorium in March of 1967 is the image of that hand extended downward, open, directed at the man on the floor. Every person in that room who was later asked about that night named that hand. The tournament director, the journalist, David Chow, a judoka in the fourth row named Raymond Su, who had placed in 3 national tournaments and who would teach for 40 years in the San Gabriel Valley, and who told this story to every class he ever taught, always specifying the angle of the hand. Not reaching, he would say. Offered, Gerald Reeves looked at the hand for a moment that lasted the correct amount of time. Then Bruce Lee spoke. He spoke quietly. He spoke words that only Gerald Reeves heard, at a volume calibrated for one recipient at a distance of 18 inches. The room did not hear the words. The room saw only the speaking of them and the effect of the words on the man receiving them. Carl Ferris, who was seated 6 rows back and who had been recording the entire evening on a small reel device in his jacket pocket, captured the sound of the room during those seconds. He captured the absolute quality of the silence. He did not capture the words. The recording exists. The words are not on it. Gerald Reeves took the hand. He stood at the fork in the road that every man in that position stands at, which is the road where one direction leads to the thing you said and the other direction leads to the thing you now know. Both roads are real, both roads are available. The choice between them is a private one, made in the seconds while the room is still watching and before anyone has spoken. Reeves looked at the room. He looked at the microphone on the floor where he had dropped it. He looked at Bruce Lee, who had already turned and was walking back toward the 3rd row, toward the gray jacket folded over the chair, toward the paper cup of cold coffee. Reeves picked up the microphone. He spoke into it. He said quietly to the room, "That is not what I expected." He said nothing further. He set the microphone on the floor again with the same deliberateness with which he had picked it up. He walked off the floor. The room exhaled. Raymond Su told his students for 40 years that he had been in rooms where things happened and in rooms where history happened, and that the difference between the two is not the size of the event. The difference is whether the people in the room understand immediately and completely that they have been present at the demonstration of something true. He said that night at the Olympic Auditorium was the only time in his life he knew it in the moment it was occurring. Bruce Lee returned to the 3rd row. He put on the gray jacket. He picked up the paper cup, noted its temperature, and set it back down. David Chow came to the end of the row and stood there. He did not speak immediately. Then he said something quiet and Bruce Lee said something back, and then David Chow put his hand briefly on Bruce Lee's shoulder. The way you touch a surface to confirm it is real. Then Bruce Lee left the auditorium. The story left with him. It traveled through the tournament circuit in the weeks that followed, the way that particular kind of story travels, which is person to person, in the specific register reserved for things that do not fit the available categories. A man in a gi in the parking lot afterward told a man in a blazer. The man in the blazer told his instructor the following Tuesday. The instructor told his advanced class on Thursday, and one of that class told his brother, who had no martial arts background whatsoever but who had the quality of telling a story without degrading it, and so the story passed from the closed world into the open world with its essential structure intact. What it gained in the passage was detail. The crowd count rose. The duration of the exchange compacted. The private sentence Bruce Lee had spoken acquired, in some tellings, a specific content that was not known and had not been witnessed. Harold Montgomery, who had been in the room and had his hands on the table and had seen it entirely and correctly, said in a 1979 interview that the versions he encountered in the subsequent decade varied in their particulars but held steady in their core. He said, "The core was this. A man made a public assessment. A man arrived to answer it. The assessment was answered. And both men left the building with something they had not carried into it." Gerald Reeves continued to train and compete. He placed in the regional circuit twice more in the late 1960s. He retired from competition in 1972 at 31 years old. He opened a school in Pasadena, California, where he taught for 23 years. He did not speak publicly about the Olympic Auditorium for a long time. He spoke about it once, in 1991, to a reporter from a small Southern California martial arts publication. He said the experience had not diminished him, he said it had corrected him. He said there is a version of correct that only arrives through contact, and that what he had understood intellectually before that night he understood physically afterward, and that the second kind of understanding is different in kind and not only in degree. He did not elaborate on what Bruce Lee had said to him from 18 inches in a quiet voice in front of 412 people. He was asked directly. He said it was not his to share. Bruce Lee would make his first major film appearance within the following years. He would demonstrate for global audiences a quality of movement and intention that most of those audiences had no framework to evaluate. The people who had frameworks, the tournament directors and the dojo instructors and the men who read the small circulation periodicals, watched those films with a different eye. They recognized something. The specific something they recognized was the quality of movement that does not announce itself. The quality that Gerald Reeves had described as the walk across the parking lot. The thing that does not look like what it is until it is already what it is. There is a lesson in what happened in the Olympic Auditorium on that Tuesday evening in March of 1967. It is not a complicated lesson. It is the kind of lesson that is simple to say and requires a great deal of living to understand at the level below the words. The thing a man says he can do and the thing a man can do are not verified by the same method. The first requires only language. The second requires contact with reality. Most of a man's life is spent in the territory of language, where his account of himself is the primary evidence available. That territory is comfortable, and it is also the territory in which a man is most capable of deceiving himself without intending to. The transition from language to contact is always sudden. It is always decisive. And it cannot be reversed. Gerald Reeves was a serious man. He was a skilled man. He had earned the right to his conclusions through 12 years of genuine work. His error was not that he had an opinion. His error was that he believed the opinion was the same as the test. It was not. The test came to him on a Tuesday evening in Los Angeles and sat in the third row and waited. What he did afterward. The way he stood at the fork and chose the road of honest reckoning is the part of the story that Raymond Sue told his students most carefully. Not the technique, not the geography of those 43 seconds. The choice. He said that the choice is always available and is rarely made with the directness that Reeves made it, and that the directness of the choice is what separates a man who was corrected from a man who was defeated. The two things are not the same. Next week we turn to a story that has not been told in full, a film set in Hong Kong, a stunt coordinator with 17 years of experience and 38 seconds that changed the direction of a production, a career, and the private understanding of what preparation actually means. The man who was there has never spoken on camera. We found the record. That story is coming.